Okay, we are now live on all platforms. Welcome everyone back to Deal Flow Live. This is the show where we have all kinds of deals that come to the plate. We look at online listings or maybe other platforms that are up and coming just to find business deals, real estate deals, and startup deals that have some kind of business aspect to them. And we analyze the deals, give our opinion on the value of them, talk through some of the considerations that you should have if you're looking into buying these businesses and some of the considerations that you should have as a deal maker just in general. And actually today we have a special guest on, but first, as always, I'm one of your hosts, Brody Vincent, and
I'm one of your other hosts, Ryan Santa.
And today we have a special guest on, Dhruv Kulkarni. Dhruv, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. And, we've got a really unique story to tell with how you got to what you're doing now. I think it's just the spirit of a founder and just like building something cool, trying to innovate in the space that you're in. I think it's something that a lot of the people that tune in and follow along are going to really appreciate and can really learn a lot from. Dhruv's had quite a journey getting to where he's at now. So I think the best place for us to start is just to hear a little bit about your journey so far and how you got to what you're doing now and what it is you're doing now.
Yeah, so it's pretty funny. I originally came from a background not really related to AI. Today I'm in San Francisco. I deal with a lot of folks who are in the AI space, but originally I'm from Los Angeles, and I didn't have any exposure to AI at all. The way I got into it was I started reading a few books. The most interesting one was Naval. He wrote a book called his Almanac, where he talks about how one of the greatest trends in the human species is how we improve technology. And so that really got me into the AI world. After I moved to the Bay Area to start my undergrad at Berkeley, I became an AI researcher. So basically what that means for folks who are not into research is I just tried to create lots of different things by building technologies on top of what already exists. One of the places I did a lot of work was in kind of the early technologies that eventually became ChatGPT. There's a bunch of labs at Berkeley where folks are working on language models, on AI, on stuff that's related to some of these things that became chatbots that people use today. And that's kind of where my story started, just using a lot of these different applications to try to solve problems. And after being at Berkeley for a little bit, I decided that I wanted to try to use these technologies to try to provide value to people. One of the things I noticed as a researcher was that a lot of people spent time cleaning data. So as a researcher myself, I sometimes would get a big spreadsheet full of data and have to clean and format that data. And I learned that this is a problem that a lot of people have felt before. Whether you're in finance, you get an Excel spreadsheet, you have to clean it up. Whether you're in healthcare, you get a bunch of forms filled out and have to manually enter them into a database. Or as a researcher, as a data scientist, you have to clean that data yourself to build models. And so I actually ended up dropping out of school to start my first company, which we called Brutus AI. And the story behind that name is Brutus betrayed Caesar. Never let your data betray you again. So use our tool to clean your data faster. Kind of because if you have unclean, dirty data, it just ruins all your models. So we ended up starting that. We raised some venture capital from a few different firms. Pear VC was one of them. They're great investors, first investors in DoorDash, and a bunch of others, and ended up learning a lot. Maybe you guys have seen this, but when you talk to first-time founders, almost everybody recalls that they made a ton of mistakes. I made so many mistakes as a first-time founder. When I read books about founders and read all of the common mistakes people make, I think I remember reading like, wow, I made all these mistakes. So since then I've learned a lot. And after working on that for something like 2 years, I ended up selling the company to a much larger healthcare business called Forta. And so Forta is this, autism therapy company. They liked my tech because they wanted to clean their healthcare data sets faster. Cleaning patient data faster is just really handy, really helpful. And so they got a lot of value out of that. I was pretty happy. My team was pretty happy. My investors were happy. And generally, I learned a lot from that process. And after the acquisition, I decided to go back to school, finish my degree, just kind of close the circuit. Learned a lot more in industry, spent some time kind of across the board in policy and investments in a few other areas. But more recently, I learned that kind of this core problem where my journey started, cleaning data, is a big problem also in the finance and private equity worlds. Whether you're a banker and you have to do, lots of different financial statements and learn about companies by doing modeling, or whether you're in private equity and you do, similar things for evaluating private companies, there still is that long drawn out process of taking data from company reports and cleaning it up. So I decided to start DocuBridge much more recently, which is a company focused on using AI embedded in Excel to help that data cleaning and modeling process for folks in finance. And since then, we've grown a lot. It's now a team of almost 15 people. We've raised a few $1 million now. It's been just really exciting, kind of, pushing down the track of solving these big problems for people in finance. So that's me. I spent a lot of time in AI, and now I'm spending time solving problems for people in finance.
That's awesome stuff. So for anyone who's listening that is thinking about, starting a business or getting involved in business, what Dhruv did is he saw a problem, a clear problem that he felt like he could solve, took note of kind of the capabilities and the skills that he had developed, and decided to go solve that problem. I think that's something that anyone who's going to be in business that's a concept you should understand and be ready to take action on. I think it's really cool how you ended up in this space of private equity and finance as well. Obviously, that's kind of the area that we talk about most in this show. So I think it'll be really relevant to some of the people that might be trying to work through some kind of business deal, whether it's trying to buy a business, trying to figure out, make sense of your own business and its financials, or, sell your business. I think you could learn a lot from the way that he looks at the financials of these things. One thing I wanted to get into while we've got you today is with the AI and the technology background that you have, you've obviously seen kind of the next wave of technology in a really intimate way. And I think something that Ryan and I have observed a lot when we look at these companies, when we look at the companies that are maybe a little bit more old, a little bit more, a little bit non-tech enabled, is that there's a lot of ability to create value in these companies and to grow them and make more profits if you can bring in good technology practices. So we thought a really great way to go about that and to be able to showcase that was just to look in one of the oldest, most kind of stable, boring types of industries that there are out there. We're going to look at some manufacturing businesses today. Just talk a little bit about how we might be able to drive the needle a little bit and create more profits by using some of the things that Dhruv has learned, going out and raising a few $1 million in different ventures, selling his company, getting it acquired, and all these different things. So I think we should get into it, guys. What do you think?
Super excited. Let's do this.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and dive in with some business deals here. So I've got Biz Buy Sell opened up here, and we're on manufacturing businesses in Florida. I think we should look at some here, but also look at some in California where you're at.
Yeah, that sounds
What's
great.
jumping out at you so far, though? Anything look interesting?
When I think, do you mind going a little bit lower? I think something caught my eye. So actually, I find furniture pretty interesting.
Let's look at this one. This is a pretty large business as well.
Yeah, it looks like it's pretty big. Yeah.
So
Okay.
It's a profitable, high growth contract furniture wholesale business with really good margins, about 33% profit margins, which I would not have guessed in this industry.
Yeah, I would expect something much lower. That's crazy.
Yeah. So they're doing just about a little over 5 million in revenue. They're asking 5 million for this at, about 1.67 in cash flow. So it's a very reasonable multiple right off the bat. What do you think about this business?
Yeah, just right off the bat, I think, a few things that stand out to me as I'm skimming this are, it looks like, its operations are pretty streamlined. We have, a team is already figured out. The owner isn't that involved. They are, it looks like they work with lots of different people. They have a pretty diverse client base, which means that the customer profile is pretty de-risked. It doesn't seem like they just have one big customer that makes up most of their revenue. Let's see. It says simple and efficient operations, which is actually the first place I would have gone to try to make things slightly more optimized. But I think one thing I've noticed in some of these, traditional manufacturing businesses is that they're probably undermarketed. And if you look at this, like they're working with a lot of different folks, Netflix, Hilton Hotels, etc. But I'm betting that there's probably some gap in their customer profile. But I would probably look more deeply into this. This is an example of a company that I might actually look deeper into. I'd ask for more information on this, like their customers. Looks like they only have 3 full-time employees, meaning lots of contractors. The main thing that I would be slightly concerned about is just like supply chain issues. What does their supply chain look like? What is the process of getting their inventory out look like? And I think that's probably one place in which there's a lot of room for optimization. Maybe you folks have seen this, but there's lots of AI tools that help you optimize your supply chain. Things like handling your inventory faster and better, avoiding data entry tasks to speed up stuff, managing procurement more efficiently, closing gaps, pricing optimizations, finding better vendors. So that's one opportunity that seems just like thematic here. But of course, need to dive a bit deeper into the weeds to see that more with more high fidelity. But what do you guys think?
I think you're spot on there. The first thing that I always look at is the financials. From a financial standpoint, you're getting a good deal here. Something above $1 million in cash flow. If you can get it for a 3x multiple, that's a pretty competitive deal. Especially something that's been around a little while. Ryan and I always like to look at like things that have been around for 10 years or more. That's usually a pretty good bet that the business has some staying power in the market, that they're onto something, right? If they've been able to last for 10 years, then they've beat the odds in being in business. So there's definitely something there, and they're doing pretty well. And if you can get it for something like a 3x multiple when it's doing this well, usually it's a pretty good sign that you're going to be able to get your money back. Another thing that's very interesting about this $5 million price point is that someone getting an SBA loan could actually buy this. It's actually the very cap for getting a small business administration loan. So if you had maybe some assets and some things that you could use as collateral, and had a little bit of savings, you might actually be able to qualify to get this under SBA and be able to finance the purchase of this over 10 years. And you would have to have probably some kind of investor come in or have a lot of capital on the sidelines to be able to buy into it. You probably have to buy in with between $500,000 or $750,000 to buy into it, for like the down payment for an SBA loan. But then the remaining portion of it would be financed over 10 years. And basically the most that they'll let you get one for is 5 million. So this is exactly at that price point.
Yeah, and with those margins, it's definitely feasible to pay off the interest payments with that revenue. So it looks pretty interesting there, especially since what my hunch is. Of course, we don't have the information here, but given that the owner is only semi-involved and has streamlined operations, this kind of looks like a retirement play. Just given that it's a traditional business, it's been around for a while. Looks like it's like streamlined. Owner just wants to sell. It's a good multiple. Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
So it looks like looks pretty interesting. And I think a lot of these retirement plays have just like insanely good multiples, given that the person just wants to get out.
Yeah, the person, whenever they're retiring, there's a few things to consider. I think one is, like you said, the great multiples. It's not about maximizing the play. It's about making a good, safe bet that gets them well paid. Another thing always to think about with retirement, and maybe I missed it, maybe it's just not in here. I didn't really see anything about openness to seller financing of any kind. But when someone is retiring, usually they've got SBA pre-approved financing. So that's good. That kind of answers that question we had before. but it doesn't say anything about seller financing. I would want to ask them about that, because usually the primary motivation for someone that wants to retire is just having good, stable cash flow access for the remainder of their life in retirement. So one thing they don't like to have to do is pay a really large sum of taxes with one lump sum payment for their business, because that drastically reduces the total money they're going to get. And a lot of times in retirement, they don't have some kind of massive liquidity need for a giant exit with all the money at once. It's more just about spreading it out to be able to cover expenses, live the way they want to live, maybe do some traveling and things like that. So a lot of times seller financing can be a little bit more of an option whenever you're buying one that's retiring, because it helps them kind of spread that cash flow out naturally over a couple of years, mitigate some of the taxes that come with a big exit, and just accomplish that cash flow need that they're looking for. So that's definitely something I would ask about here.
Interesting. And I think that this is definitely a company I'd at least try to look a bit deeper into. Learn more about specific customers, likely, like, reliability of revenue, diversification of revenue, growth stuff. Given that the owner is sitting back, I'm guessing it's a bit more stabilized right now. So it might not be a growth play, but just, what kind of jumps out to me here.
And that's a great thing to consider as well. You mentioned, like, obviously what we're looking at here is potential growth plays that you could use technology for. But something like this with great cash flow doesn't necessarily have to be a growth play. This is the type of thing, like to your point from before, if you got an SBA loan or something, or maybe had some seller financing, there's plenty of meat on the bone with this cash flow of almost $1.7 million a year to be able to service the debt that comes with that, and then provide still a fantastic income for someone. So even if you didn't grow this at all and you just kept it stabilized, kept it going, you would probably be paying the debt for it and making still, to the tune of somewhere between maybe even up to 500,000 or even $1 million a year. So definitely a very interesting play here. A lot of things you could do with it.
Super interesting. Yeah.
Ryan, what are your thoughts?
There's nothing else to say on this one. Let's just move on to the next one. I think this one's picked clean.
Yeah, I think that's really just a good, solid business on the fundamentals. Let's see what else we see here. Anything else you see that's jumping out at you, Dhruv?
Yeah, that Bath Solutions one looks pretty interesting.
This one right here?
Yeah.
So this one's probably a franchise.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Franchise then. Yeah, you're right. Do you typically look at franchises or no?
We're not opposed to them per se, but we tend not to look at them quite as often because it's tough to judge whether it would be a viable acquisition.
Yeah.
The biggest reason for that is, and for anyone who's tuning in who likes to look at deals that are listed online like this, a lot of times it's tough to really have a great understanding of what the business would look like for you personally. If it's a franchise, they try to project it out, but ultimately it's a new business, and in a certain sense, it's a startup, like an individual little mini startup. Anytime you do start a franchise of something. So we like to look at more established businesses, mostly just because they have cash flow that you can really visualize, and you can start to model out like what it might look like. So it can be a little bit difficult to understand exactly what the flow is going to look like with these.
It's pretty interesting. I think the reason that it stood out to me was precisely because it was so small, and maybe that's just because I see companies that are smaller as probably having more gaps and opportunities in growth. But yeah, I mean, definitely can move on to a different one. I see your point about franchises.
What else do we have here?
Packing. Did you see that packing one? That one looked pretty interesting.
Up here? A little
I
bit
think
lower?
I think it was a bit lower. Have you seen packing businesses before?
Oh, here we go. We haven't really looked at a packing business before, but I think this is a good size to look at. So it looks like they pack, let's see. They don't really talk about what they pack. But this is right up our alley in the terms of like, good, solid, stable, boring businesses. This is something that is not really going to get disrupted by AI. Things still have to be packed, but I
Yeah.
could see it getting very, very improved by AI. So I would love to hear your thoughts on like how you might improve the processes of something like a packing business.
Yeah, I actually love this one because, one, like you said, financials, it looks like a good multiple here. It's, stable enough. It's a sizable enough amount of revenue that, I wouldn't assume that's immediately going to go out of business. But if you scroll down a little, I might see something about customers in the description. Let's see. They work with food distributors, food service distributors, restaurant groups, proprietary goods. I think that's enough listings to assume that's more than just one big customer. So that's a green flag to me. Nationwide services, meaning they've opened up distribution. The one thing that I think is very interesting about packing is I'm guessing they have some amount of losses that they pay for because they have errors in their packing, errors in manufacturing and that supply chain. And a big trend that I've seen recently is using AI and vision models to try to catch these defects, defect detection, and that kind of thing to prevent these mistakes from being moved on to customers, and doing this cheaper and cheaper given improving models. So actually, a friend of mine, he's working on a company that kind of makes this problem easier to solve by creating fake data. You create fake data to train your AI model, so your AI model can catch defects in in these chains, in supply chains and so on. So things like defects in packing, in really anything, new scenes. So it's I think that's one opportunity to improve this. Like you can see, I'm guessing probably tens of thousands of dollars worth of goods that are not, send like customer quality to that you just cannot send out because you can't live with that level of quality, that you can probably start to catch more frequently using AI and then improve your system to avoid making these mistakes. So there's probably some opportunity to make improvements there. Another one is in a business like this, there's lots of compliance and logistical and like paperwork related overhead. And it looks like they have their production team doing that. Guessing the production manager has to do a lot of this paperwork. There's also lots of systems that we can use to streamline that, like better ERP systems, based on AI that automate a lot of this paperwork filling, form filling. And these are not both the things I mentioned are not growth tools. They're more like efficiency. But I think even then, it's something that's going to benefit the business in terms of quality and in terms of just moving forward faster. So that's what immediately jumps to me. How about you two? Any thoughts on your end?
I agree with everything you said, and one thing I'll add to that is like I think the common denominator there is anything with what would otherwise be a very manual process. I think something like packing, historically very, very manual. It's like one after another of the same type of thing, assembly line style. I always think there's a lot of opportunities for like incremental improvements there, because a lot of the times, especially if the company's been around for a while, which it doesn't look like they tell us how long it's been around, but
Yeah.
family owned business looks like it's been around for a little while. A lot of times they've just, been doing the same thing for a long time. And I think very quickly you can identify little operational improvements like that and just, make all those incremental like improvements that stack up to higher revenue and more bottom line profit for you. So for anything like this where you get to know their process a little bit and you just see things that make you immediately think, why are they doing it like that? That's horribly inefficient. Like those are the types of value add plays that you can make in these types of acquisitions.
Definitely. And another thing that I noticed here is, the owner does sales, maintaining existing relationships, ingredient sourcing. Uh, there's probably some, given that the owner is willing to stay on after closing, that's a good sign for just maintaining these relationships, maintaining sales. There's definitely some level of risk there in, making sure that we don't lose, customers, especially the biggest ones. The owner probably owns the biggest relationships, so there's risk there. But, ingredient sourcing is definitely something that we can automate with AI. Like vendor management is definitely something you can make more efficient, especially since the owner probably doesn't find the best optimization between cost and quality. The owner probably has their own network of of people that they've worked with before, so may not necessarily be the best supply chain. So there's probably another opportunity there. But I'm curious to hear what you think about how the owner owns a lot of these relationships. That is definitely something that I'm somewhat wary of.
What do you think, Ryan?
When it comes down to co-packing, you're going to live and die on your contracts. A co-packing facility is essentially a bottling and processing plant for a number of different brands and items. So with this, it looks like they may be alluding to more hot sauce and beverages. So when it comes down to automation, you can get those vendor relations down. Pat, I think you're more going to find your success, though, in standardizing how billing goes out, how vendor contracts are made. I don't know that you'll be able to find, given this context, better vendors, and I mean, you'll be able to expand it. But as we've alluded to in this, it's a relationship business at the end of the day. And perhaps the owner staying on, like you said, is the best option because maybe he's getting a price for goods that otherwise somebody who isn't him would get from these vendors. So given the amount of automation that these businesses tend to employ, especially when it comes to bottling and it comes to putting labels on stuff, there is a hand to it. But where your technology would probably change everything is in the QA of the labels, in contracts, in making sure things go out paid on time, make sure that billing is correct. All the things that suffer the most from human error is where you're going to save a company like this probably hundreds of thousands a year close to, simply because there's such mom and pop operations within the scale of it. That something that just does that will give them so much of their time back to then expand and develop their business.
And I would say to bridge the gap between both of those points, I think that if I had to guess, a lot of times the owners of small businesses like this are, he or she might be selling because they're burned out, or might be selling because they're looking to retire, might just be looking to move to something else. There's a lot of different reasons that people come to that conclusion. But if it is that they're feeling burned out by being involved in a lot of things, it could be that there's a lot of these technology or AI processes that help remove some of that stress from them. So there might be some kind of play to keep them involved and keep some of those relationships intact and really have someone to advise on the sales aspect, which can be one of the tougher aspects of the business, while you just improve the processes and help them step back from the business a little bit if it's been really burdensome on them and they don't really know how to fix it.
That's pretty interesting. And, I think both of you alluded to this, but, the RevOps piece is the highest impact, where it's, like both of you said, actually, the contracts, the billing, payment cycles, the relationships are, of course, things that we still need to do ourselves, but the RevOps will be what ultimately increases the top line and improves the multiple the most if we decide to sell this again later, or if it's not a sale play and if it's more of just a revenue play, then even then the RevOps is the most critical piece. So a lot of the AI efficiency stuff is less key than I think even in RevOps, there's so many amazing things that AI is doing, like legal review, payments collection stuff that happens faster, and so on and so forth. It just improves the business, and that's not a marketing thing. It's much more of like a working with these customers to just work through these collection things faster, whether it's on the sales side or whether it's on the invoicing side. So I think that's a big thing for a lot of these old fashioned businesses with larger contracts.
Yeah, and old fashioned businesses. We had a couple comments that came in on Instagram from Rosalind. Shout out Rosalind. She said automations are really key, and also having a director of operations for something like this is really key. So I think those are two things that you could have in mind with a business like this too. Is like, how can I automate these processes? Like you said, even more than AI, it's about streamlining things that are going on in something like this. How can you do things quicker, more efficiently? To Ryan's point, with less human error, automation is a great way to do that. And I think ultimately building up to the point where there is someone that is overseeing all of this other than you can be a really great way to position it for a much better sale and flip the price from, maybe paying this, what was it, about a 3x multiple or so, a little bit under, flipping it potentially from, or a little bit over even, flipping it potentially from a 3x multiple to something a little bit bigger, maybe 4, maybe 5, if you were able to grow it a little bit and put someone in that can really serve as that operating piece to it, is what I would be thinking about with this.
Interesting. And it sounds as if there is probably a lot of room for improving, minute pieces of this. Like there seems to be some alpha here. It doesn't seem like it's just a purely. It does seem like there's some growth opportunity here.
Yeah, I think so as well. I will say it's not a bad multiple. It's a little bit high for the cash flow that it's at. I think, whenever you see something under 500,000, I would prefer that it's at more like a 2x, a 2.5x multiple. But at the same time, I don't think it's a bad deal. And if you could get some good financing terms on this, maybe some seller financing, maybe something else, you never know, right? You might be able to make a really good deal and something that works out well. Should we look at another one, guys?
Yeah, love it.
And if you're tuning in, let us know in the comments if there's any other particular types of businesses that you want us to look at as well. Ryan, do you see anything jumping out at you?
I can't read good on this small screen and in general, but also on the small screen. Let's see, where would Dhruv change somebody's life? Keep scrolling.
Or anything that you see, Dhruv.
Yeah. Another chain.
We've got a multi-platform disposable medical supply e-com retailer.
Drop out for you. Dhruv?
Oh, we lost our guest, but we'll get him back, I'm sure.
We'll get him
we'll
back
keep looking
in a
at
second.
deals. Okay. I see your comment, Rosalind. We'll do a B2B one. We've got an established B2B service business in Tallahassee. Let's see what this is all about.
Let's have that one. I shouldn't have told him I can't read.
You want to kick us off here? What do you think so far? Here we go.
Vinyl?
You're back, Dhruv.
There we go.
Welcome back.
So we've got a B2B business in Tallahassee. We're jumping in trying to figure out what it is exactly, but it's got pretty solid cash flow.
Is that vinyl? Is that vinyl signs and or is that like thread?
Yeah, it looks like some kind of like vinyl sign manufacturing.
Okay, well, this is a business I think that is going to be incredibly important to have your operations streamlined on, because pulling material, cutting the material, making sure that you're having routine customer acquisition, getting stuff shipped out on time, making sure that you have enough stock for when people have custom orders. This is one where I think it's simpler to understand the why this could go off the rails so quickly if your supply chain was off at any point. And given how large and robust the vinyl industry is, whether it's signs, stickers, wrapping vehicles, there's a lot of room to grow and develop a company like this, especially if you had something like Dhruv's company to come and make sure that you were spending smartly.
I will say one
think
thing I've
like
identified in looking in this a little bit is it does look like it's a franchise. This is interesting though. It looks like it's
We've looked at this one before too.
it looks like it's a pretty profitable one. Let's move on to another one though. Let's look at something else B2B. Especially with some kind of like professional service, I feel like that's where AI could really step in here.
Yeah.
Anything in the professional services category that you can think of you'd like to take a look at, Dhruv?
What could be interesting? I think, I've seen a lot of people trying accounting rollups recently. And I think the accounting rollup strategy, people are not using AI as much as they probably should be.
I could not agree more. I think accounting is a great stable industry because it's never going anywhere.
And there's a dramatic shortage of accountants right now, actually, in the country.
Yep. There's a dramatic
CPA,
shortage of accountants. It's incredibly hard to find a good accountant. So people, when they do find one, rarely switch, or if they find a good accounting company,
they're dropping
rarely
the
switch.
hours now to get your CPA. They're dropping it by like 20 or 30 hours.
Wow.
So there's a desperate need for them. So this roll-up would be very helpful to a lot of people if done properly, and to a lot of accountants who are getting burnt out and leaving the industry.
And a lot of times I'm actually working on selling like a tax planning and preparation business right now. And the person that's looking at it most closely as a buyer right now, it's a very large established firm that has been rolling up other companies and tucking in other companies for a while. And it's a very simple, straightforward process for them. They look at, whether the deal pencils out money wise, and they do it if it does, because they can add their customers, bring them into their system, and just very quickly grow. So if you've got an eye for processes and automation and know how to build a team, then accounting can be a really good way to go, because it's a very simple, straightforward process. From what I've seen, it's really just like, all it is, are we using the same systems to process things? No. Let's just move the data over, start doing it here. Or if you are using the same system, you add in all the client data and just keep going. And the transition tends to be pretty good, because a lot of the actual service delivery of the accounting is the same from one business to another. We've got a question, by the way. Sorry to cut you off, Drew, because we've actually got a question for you. So JC Mendez on Instagram is asking, how would you improve accounting firms with AI?
Yeah, so one big thing that I've noticed, a lot of accountants struggle with is, especially in the lower middle market, a lot of the data they get is really disorganized, and it's messy. When you are an accountant, you want to build a lot of financial statements in Excel, but sometimes the folks that send you their data are sending it to you in strange formats, like just PDFs. And I didn't realize this was a big problem until I really thought about it. Last year, my accountant asked me for my bank statements, so I just downloaded like 100 pages worth of PDFs and just sent it, right? And I'm imagining, she had to spend a lot of time just manually entering that into Excel. That cannot have been fun. And if she had a tool, I'm pretty confident that not every accountant has a tool like that handles kind of the data extraction, data cleaning, data workflows, which is why people, when they imagine audit, accounting, tax, a lot of these industries, they imagine, wrangling data, working with paper documents with Excel. So I think there's a big opportunity there, using OCR tools that are pretty, widely available nowadays, or even more, new tools in the LLM space that help to automate things like data entry, data cleaning, data formatting. Like if you get sent over like 100 invoices, extracting data from every invoice manually into Excel, super annoying. But there's definitely ways to automate that. And that's true for not just invoices, but also for POs, for different, types of forms that you might use. DocuBridge has some solutions to this, the tool I'm working on, but there's lots of other firms that have interesting approaches to this. Like, I know QuickBooks is working on some AI tools. Not everyone uses
Actually,
QuickBooks.
someone in the comments actually just said QuickBooks AI is what their accountant uses.
Yeah. I think
actually wasn't familiar with this. How does their tool work?
They have a lot of cool new different ways of doing things, but I think where they're headed is where it's most exciting, where you really don't have to do a lot of the manual work yourself. You just upload all your files, and then it does a lot of the wrangling and magic for you. And QuickBooks is just one example. I think a lot of these other ERPs are doing some pretty cool stuff. Like, I know, and these companies are legacy companies that have been around forever, but like SAP and NetSuite, they are actually trying to put in new new AI tools to automate a lot of their document work. And QuickBooks is just one example, but I'm pretty confident that if we find a lot of different accountants across the board, there will be places in which they're doing manual work that could be pretty quickly sped up. But I think bigger picture, where there's some opportunity for quick value creation is where you have one accounting firm, one like tax planning and strategy firm, and one like maybe lower middle market audit firm. And I'm guessing they have large overlapping theoretical customer bases that could, sell to each other very quickly. You give people discounts on related services, and the upsell and cross-sell becomes pretty fast. I think that's an obvious one in this space. Another one is if you're doing consumer accounting, going to, to take multiple firms across different areas and kind of taking all of their marketing materials and putting it together. Things like groups and events becomes a lot easier, and then the marketing becomes a lot more efficient there too. It's not an AI play, but just generally why I think accounting is pretty favorable nowadays.
That's awesome. I think we should look at one and kind of dive in. We've got a bunch here, which actually is kind of surprising. A lot of times these get snapped up quick, but we've got a bunch to look at here. I figure we might as well just go for one that's kind of bigger. A lot of times there's a little bit more to talk about if it's a bigger business. You guys see any that are jumping out at you? Let's look at this one.
Yeah, the Sunshine CPA firm.
Yeah, this one's interesting because I saw that they kind of list what like the percentages of service that they're doing, which is one of the most helpful things to determine if a business is worth being part of like a larger strategy, like a roll-up of some kind or something like that.
The multiple out the gate is large, but we do see the market trending towards that 4x being the new 3x at this point in time, especially with companies coming on the market like this.
So accounting is a little bit different when it comes to multiples, actually. I learned this recently because I have been working on selling like a small tax planning business. Most small businesses usually go off of like a profit multiple. So if the business is profiting $100,000 a year, might sell for like a 2-3x multiple, $200,000 or $300,000 a year. Accounting is a little bit different in the sense that it usually goes for like a 1 to a 1.5x on revenue, just because it's a little bit more focused on the client base itself and whether you can fold that in. So it's a little bit of a distinction. So this one actually is priced at, let's see, just a little bit over maybe like a 1.1x or something like that. So it's about in that range that you would expect here.
Interesting. And
yeah,
I'm guessing,
I just
that's because you have like a super sticky client base.
Exactly. And especially if you have the previous CPA staying on to help with that transition a little bit. If they're staying on to kind of like transition things, even just over a couple of years, that's usually enough to really make sure that those clients get handed off properly, because it's mostly just about whether they can get the job done well. And, the stickiness comes partially from the relationship, but more so it's very difficult to switch, because whenever you've been filing your taxes somewhere for a few years, all of your data is there, all of your history is there. It's a lot easier to go answer previous questions like, how did we write this off 2 years ago? Like, how are we going to do it this year? It's a lot easier to answer those questions because of all the historical data that you have. So sometimes that makes it easier. So a lot of times they have sticky client bases. The one thing that they usually look out for, the businesses that buy these often that I've seen, is they're looking for a lot of those relationships not to be dependent. And this is the case with any business. You want to look for those relationships not to be very dependent on the previous owner. no active
You know, I think
marketing.
that first sentence in the second paragraph is super interesting.
Recurring revenue with very high client retention.
Sorry, the
Yeah.
that one and then the one after that. The one after that is, you know, crazy. It shows you there's just some opportunity here.
Yeah, anything where they're not doing any marketing, I always see as a massive opportunity because it's not too difficult to find either a service provider for that or just to do a little bit of research and teach yourself how to run some basic ads, whether that be Google ads, Facebook ads, something like that. Or find some other kind of out of the box marketing strategies. And it blows me away how many small businesses aren't really investing in that sort of thing. They've got 9 employees, so for something this price point, that's pretty solid. You're getting a good team there. You're getting a good solid team that can kind of keep up the workload. Oh, and he's back. There we go. We lost you for a second, but you're back.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So another thing here is the owner is nearing retirement age and would like to slow down. That's the reason for selling. I think that's always like an ideal case to see when you're looking at like what is the reason that someone's selling. Is if it's about retirement for them, that just shows that you're flexible in what you can achieve for them. You might be able to sell or finance it again. And also it's a pretty genuine reason for wanting to sell your business. There's always the question of why would someone sell this business if it's doing well? And that question is pretty well answered whenever it's about retirement.
It answers a lot of, like, like you said, there's a lot of these businesses where people just, they don't see it growing, and they just try to mask that in the sale process. Whereas this is just something that makes it so much easier to, to trust.
So what do you think if you were to kind of cap this off here, if you were to acquire one of the businesses that we talked about today, Dhruv, what do you think would be your first 5 moves, knowing what you know about automation, technology, AI, and processes?
Yeah. Honestly, I would go with the packing company. I think the packing company was close. I think it would be between the accounting firm and the packing company. Not furniture. Furniture was not, a contender at all, I think. But accounting was very tempting. But the packing firm was interesting to me because I think that there's something about that that industry that just is so optimizable with AI. With accounting, to me, one of the difficulties was seeing it as a growth play because a lot of those those people that they've worked with so far have been using their own relationships to grow the business. They didn't market it, and so of course you can market it, but I think there's some degree of organic relationship building required with accounting. Like, I don't think you can just run Google ads and get clients for accounting. Like, people usually hear about their accounting firms from their friends, and if they haven't taken on new clients for a while, there's that means that they'll be slow to get started once again. So to me, that one seemed a little iffy, and also I thought the growth potential was lower than the potential of the packing firm. You can do a lot of fun stuff like predictive maintenance, quality control, uh, things like like predictive pricing, demand forecasting, supplier optimization, inventory management. Uh, Eventually it can become like a really, really efficient store. And when it's efficient, then you can have really killer prices and scale really efficiently because it becomes not just traditional services. You're just competing in a different league at that point. It's like software enabled services. Scaling becomes easier because people are more willing to buy it. I could see it becoming a lot bigger than the accounting roll up. What I would do is I would treat the acquisition as an AI enabled service, whether it's packing as the service or accounting as the service. And I see packing becoming much more enabled by AI than than accounting, at least in the short term. Eventually, accounting will become much more efficient, in my belief. But I think you can turn the packing firm into like a really, really awesome shop, drive down the price pretty significantly, outcompete a lot of people, and then start to close a lot of contracts.
I think that sounds like a great plan. Ryan, what about you? What was your favorite that you saw today?
I'm in agreement with Dhruv on this one. I think co-packing is a severely underserviced industry when it comes to technology. I think it gets grouped in with a lot of other service industry stuff that it should not be. I've done a lot of digging into co-packing and beverages, and specifically, energy drinks like Bive. It's a New Jersey staple, actually born in New Jersey, that drink. So I don't think people understand how pivotal co-packing is, like, to the industry. So when you get Dhruv in there, you get everything running, where it's not just, some of these places are literally running on Windows 98 and Windows XP, and that's it. You get Dhruv in there, you get everything moving along. Like he said, you outperform your competitors. You're offering better prices, faster turnarounds, and you're moving at a speed that they can only comprehend. I think the most scalability and viability is the co-packing.
I think it's a great play. I think whenever you see something that just screams old, outdated, hasn't really changed in a long time, a lot of times the older they are, the more that is the case with these small businesses. I think there's plenty of opportunity for someone young like all of us to come in and make a couple of small changes that just really improve it and take it into the modern age. So I think that's a great pick. I'm going to have to third that one as well. What was the biggest thing, kind of the biggest takeaway from tonight that you had, Dhruv?
I think the way you guys evaluate the core of the business outside of, just like growth potential is super interesting to me. Like, I think initially the way you thought about multiples, just as, even more foundational than what the company is, even more foundational than the customer stuff, is interesting because, to me, my first instinct is always just to think about, the customers and the quality of the product. But I think that was a big thing for me, like the order in which you evaluate things, like the reason for selling, the multiple, the quality of the customers and revenue and so on. So just hearing you guys think through it is super fascinating to me. And the other thing is, I think hearing you guys' insights about specific industries, like, for example, Ryan, what you know about packing, and Brody, what you know about accounting and tax planning, hearing the insights that you guys have on the back end is just super insightful.
And by the same token, I think it was really interesting to combine like the focus on what are the fundamentals of the company as an operation and what is the growth potential, because both of those things are so important. I think it's kind of the difference between being a little bit more in the startup world versus looking at like a lot of established businesses. But I think if you can take notes from both camps and approach business with elements of both and think, how could I grow this like it was a startup, even if it is an established business, that's where you can get some really outsized returns.
I love the mentality, and I think that a lot more people should definitely adopt it. And we've seen this big trend of people trying to do both growth and efficiency. People always say profitable, efficient growth in the public markets, but I think people don't think about it enough. At the early stages, they make concessions on one thing to optimize for another. But I think, if there's a way to do all of them, then, we should definitely go for it.
I think if you're buying a business or you own a business and you're thinking about trying to see where your weaknesses are, I think reaching out to Dhruv and DocuBridge is certainly worth your time. I think AI is a scary word. People have many, many feelings on it, and, they have a lot of questions. But I think what we've talked about today and what we've gone over is that it's the best tool that you probably have barely heard of, and it's going to take it'll take an industry that feels stale and feels kind of already where it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it stage, and you find out it was actually probably a bit more broke than you thought. Just because you weren't thinking about it doesn't mean it wasn't happening. So I certainly learned a lot from Dhruv today. I felt like I got smarter, as I'm so lucky to do with these guests coming on here. He's got a great team behind him. He's got a great product, and I definitely feel like at some point, if I, whatever I stumble into, or Brody, whatever you guys end up doing, there might be, definitely some crossover with Dhruv, especially with his team, because what's the thing we always talk about these businesses? do they even have a website? And odds are they don't. So they probably don't have anything like his software either, making them nearly as efficient.
You would be amazed, Drew, at how, because you come from a world where not having a website probably is not even a thought. It's amazing how many of these businesses that we look at, they don't even have a website, or their website is like, it's one page. It's like very simple.
Making millions.
Like we saw, some of them just aren't doing marketing or advertising of any kind, and it's still working for them, which is amazing in 2024. But whenever you see that it's working despite not doing that, just imagine what could be done if you were doing it.
That's ridiculous. That is actually ridiculous. Wow.
It's far flung from the world that you live in. That would never happen. But to cap things off here, I know Ryan mentioned DocuBridge. I would love to hear a little bit more for the audience. One run through again about what DocuBridge is, who it helps, and how you can find it, and how people can find you as well.
Yeah, and thanks so much for the time to talk about this. So for those who are interested in reaching out, our website is docubridge.ai. And on there's a bunch of videos of some of the coolest stuff we're doing, if you're curious to take a look. In a nutshell, we're building an AI tool that lives in your Excel. It's an AI-based Excel plugin that helps people across the finance stack, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, whether you're in accounting or tax or private equity, save time on their document workflows, meaning things like manual data entry, data cleaning, financial modeling, and tracking. So we've learned after talking to lots and lots of people in finance that there's just lots of these problems that people face, like building models from scratch, from dealing with data, finding where data came from, and so on. So we built this Excel tool to help them save time. And already we've seen people start to save hours and hours, and not just people on the analyst and associate level. One firm we're working with called Maverick Management is saving 8 hours a week. And this is not just an analyst, this is the founder and the GP. This kind of really surprised me. People expect it's like, maybe AI can help my team save time, but it can actually also help you save time. So, this guy, Dan Flood, his time went from spending, 5-8 hours a week on manual data entry to actually just doing all of that immediately with our tool. So generally, if you're interested in chatting about AI, no pressure on the product or anything, but if you're just interested in having a conversation about AI, my email is dhruv@docubridge.ai. And if you're in the finance space, if you use Excel, I'm sure we can try to make your life a little easier. Feel free to reach out.
Awesome stuff. And what's the best place aside from your email, what's the best place to follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, so my LinkedIn, it's my name, Dhruv Kulkarni, and it's linkedin.com/ my first name - my last name - DSK. So that's a pretty good place. I'm going to start posting on there pretty often about some of the fun stuff we're doing. And if you're interested in following along, that's a good way to find out. Another way is we have a newsletter on the website, so feel free to sign up for that. I'll probably send a few emails from there. So, exciting stuff to come.
Awesome. And it's right here on the first homepage of the website. I found it. This is a great website, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially ones that work with some of these bigger companies, they try to hide what they're doing. Like you go to one of these big data companies and you look at their website, you really have no idea what they're doing, and they try to get you to book a demo just to figure it out. We want to be really clear about what we're doing because we don't like wasting people's time. If it's not really relevant to people, then no point. And if it is, then it saves some time to just directly book a demo. So that's kind of one of my values, at least with the way I'm thinking about the website.
Well, that's awesome, Dhruv. Thank you again so much for coming on, for sharing your insights, for sharing a little bit about DocuBridge. I really appreciate your perspective, and it's been a fascinating conversation with a couple of industries we haven't really looked at before on here. So I learned more about co-packing personally. I learned about a couple more things. I feel like I have a lot more ideas of how you could optimize some of the processes of a company. So thank you.
And thank you for having me. I learned a lot about the industries you guys know a lot about the way you think through these businesses, and I'm excited to continue to follow along on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're tuning in, whether it be the first time or continuing to tune in, we do Deal Flow live every Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So tune in again and again. We talk about all types of deals, whether it be some of these more startup-y type businesses like Dhruv's, where he's going out there and raising capital and growing in that direction, or whether it be buying established businesses. This is a place to talk about business deals. So let us know what types of deals you're interested in, what types of deals you want to talk about and look at, and we'll cover them right here on the show. But until next time, thank you guys for tuning in. And this has been Deal Flow Live. You can find myself on basically any platform, just at my name, Brody Vinson. And Ryan, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Ryan Santo on LinkedIn. Just send me a note when you request the ad.
Awesome. And we will see you on the next one.